everybody, it's Drybear. And I just got done doing my Path of Exile 2 Abyss League review, and during that time, they just put out the 0.3.1 patch that changes towers, it messes with alchemy orbs, it does a bunch of stuff with patches on the ground, so some really cool stuff, some fundamental end game changes that people have been wanting for a while. So today we're going to dive into the patch notes. So the first thing to note here is that they are focusing on the end game here. So a lot of the big complaints that people have had about end game, aside from, you know, just random nuisances and things like that, has been the Atlas and how it functions. There's definitely been a big reliance on towers, because obviously you can only go up to Waystone 15 until you corrupt, and then you go to Waystone 16, but then you're really trying to fish for all these extra affixes, modifiers, scalars, increasing your rarity drops, your quantity of drops, getting higher and higher. And a lot of that relies, at least it used to, on being able to stack 2 or 3, in some cases, towers in one area, so one node on the Atlas can actually be super juiced into oblivion. Now, the way it works in PoE 1 is a little bit different. You're able to manually adjust each map as you go, which means it's a lot more modular and a lot less cumbersome in a lot of ways. And there's definitely some downsides with the Atlas system, that because the Atlas is ever growing and you don't have any control over where the nodes are, there's going to be these two modes, at least how I think of it in my head. You're either juicing or pushing, like you're pushing to try and clear very difficult maps, or you're traversing. And you switch between those modes. Traversing is just, I need to get to somewhere else on the Atlas, and I'm going to use lower or like blue quality waystones as I go through to get where I'm trying to go, instead of trying to find the towers. And then once we have the towers and we juice it all up, then we get to play. And there's been a lot of complaints about that. So let's dive into what changed in this patch. So the first change is you no longer need towers to use tablets. Instead, tablets can now be placed into the map device when you open a map, which is a huge, massive change. It means that that requirement for traversal is now greatly lessened, and in many cases might be completely removed as well, because you're going to be finding maps that you just, hey, I have this node, I can put it onto it, I can add whatever end game activity. If I need Delirium, if I need Breach, if I need Ritual, I can add it on there. If I want to add a boss when there's no boss, I can add it on there. When I want to add some kind of rarity, I absolutely can. There's definitely some questions around the unique precursor tablets, or just unique tablets in general for what you can use, but this is a massive change that moves it closer in line with way PoE 1 works, and has been a big question mark for a lot of people in the game overall. So we jump in game after the update. You can see that now my precursor tab, or my tablet tab, has a whole bunch of numbers on it, right? And those numbers will relate to how many times you can use it, because obviously, you know, when we go over to our Atlas here, you're going to see that you're going to have like this tower that you can apply to things, right? You can apply a bunch of stuff to this. However, once the tower is there's a lot of nodes that you can add to certain areas to create a lot of value out of one tablet. So in order to get to parity, or I guess as close to parity as they can try to do, they're going to have to actually modify these to have multiple uses so that you can still get the amount there. Now, previously, the tablets would say affects X amount of maps in the range. I'm guessing they just lined this up to say if it applied to 4 maps in the range, now you can just use it 4 times on 4 different maps if you want to, and put those down in there. There's definitely some questions around, like, I guess Forgotten by Time, we could just throw this on and try it. There's some like unique ones that I'm very curious about. So I can't reach this node right here. I'm curious, like, how would you even manage to use something like Forgotten by Time? And I guess that answers my question. It's not even what it used to be. So I just grabbed that by icon, but this is just, now it adds an expedition to the map, and you get expeditions and runic monsters duplicated as well. So some value from those as well. So some of these ended up getting just reworked or changed, which we'll dive into in a minute. But you can see that now that we can grab these. It looks like I have a new quest as well from Doriani on the side there. Let's just grab one of these and just go to a map and just look at it, right? So we just grab a map here, and then if we put this in, just how it does for the towers, like, do I have any like low level maps? So I just went and grabbed a level 2 just randomly off the trade thing. So you can see that, yeah, based on the number of affixes that the Waystone has, which is exactly how the towers worked before, now it's applied directly to the map itself. So if you put something in that has the number of affixes that you need, right, you can put it on there. I got some in here, so we can grab those, put them in. Now we can start applying these into these spots, and this will apply to the map itself and open the map and then consume a use. So now you could basically anywhere on the atlas, let's make sure we don't forget these, anywhere on the atlas as you go around, as long as you can access the node, right? So you can actually get that going. You can just select it, put in your map, and add your tablets on top of it and consume them, which is a crazy change. So as mentioned, tablets now have a fixed number of uses as described by the implicit modifier. Each time you use a tablet while running a map, the number of remaining uses will be decremented. Once it reaches 0, the tablet is destroyed. So you use the last use. When you apply it, it's going to disappear and vanish from your inventory. You can also use up to 3 tablets with each map, but the number of slots available is based on how many modifiers the map has. Running a map with 6 modifiers will enable all 3. So again, just like the way the towers worked before, based on how strong the map is that you're doing and what you're doing with it, you can cause it to allow you to use more tablets in one single go. And again, as you'd expect, tablets cannot be applied to areas that have already been attempted. This is the same thing as the way it worked before. So if you juiced a whole bunch of areas, but then you died once and failed the map and you're stuck out, that's what was left over after the end of it. So you couldn't do that map again with the juiced modifiers. You have to be able to succeed at that first attempt in order to get that going. So again, they're just maintaining that same kind of parity. Towers can still be used to gain visibility, and they will also drop an extra tablet as a reward for completing them. So if you go into game, tablets function more like, I guess, Breath of the Wild, right? It's just to reveal the map. You'll notice that the radius of these towers is literally just exploring a region in like a gacha RPG or like, you know, a Zelda-like game. But you can see like the range here is still going to be revealed, so you can still at least get that reveal from it. And then when you complete the tower as a map, it will give you a tablet, which might be worth juicing, maybe, depending on what's on top of it. Obviously, you can still add tablets to the towers to make that map better if you really wanted to. Non-unique tablets now have 10 uses instead of 12 to 8, or in the case that the Overseer tablet, it now has 10 uses previously to 4. So they're kind of like modifying it based on what they thought, like just making, I guess, executive decisions, just making a call on what needs to be the way it is. I'm sure they'll keep an eye on it. And they say as your tablets are now directly applied to your maps, this means you can now apply to the content you desire every single map you run without having to traverse and find towers. However, the ceiling of the amount of content you can apply to a single map has been lowered. Overall, this results in a more streamlined experience, but they wanted to make sure that they tried to make it as close to the way it was before. So you can see that bountiful, breeding, brimming, like all these extra modifiers, depending on what gets applied to the map itself. For the value of it, they scaled with the value that gets applied to that map based on that. So this is going to be a long list of these here. You can see relics, runes, sacrifice, all of these down here. I'll leave them on screen as we can scroll if you'd like to, so you can see what these turned into based on the value you get. But they just did some math to try and modify. Since the whole system had to change, they decided to make some changes to the individual applications. They also added tablet modifiers, since a little bit more flexible there. You can now add in as merry spirits, additional essences, additional rogue exiles, additional summoning circles, additional strong boxes, additional shrines, and additional summoning circles, increased chance to contain a summoning circle. So an additional summoning circle, or if it doesn't have one, it can have a specific summoning circle based on what you're looking for. So it gives you even more control over what you're trying to get out of the map. They also changed it so that all maps now contain map bosses, except for some specific ones that are designed not to. To complete a map, you're only required to kill the boss. You no longer have to kill any rares, and you can do as much as or as little as the rest of the map as you please. So this is kind of a big change here. There has been some complaints about the rares, but honestly, I haven't heard too many complaints about the rares being a requirement for the map ever since they added rares to the mini map. If you look at the top right corner, you see those all icons that are pointing to the rares. That didn't used to be the case if you played on launch. It was just you had to go find them, which is kind of awkward. I wish they would do the same treatment for like the last few Abyss mobs in an Abyss, because sometimes one mob runs away, you don't know where it is, but now it's no longer an issue. Every map has a boss if it makes sense for it to have a boss, which is going to be most maps. You can also, I'm curious what the modifier, so that answers that question. So if we go over here to the Overseer tablets, which would previously add a boss, now instead of adding a boss, it empowers a boss, which gives the map boss an upgrade to a powerful map boss. So instead of adding a boss to the map, now it just makes the boss stronger overall. I'm kind of curious how this modified here. So if we go and look at these, we can see, yeah, so this icon now represents not that it has a boss. All maps have a boss, unless they're a unique map that doesn't have one. But now, if it has this icon, it now has a powerful map boss. So powerful map bosses are map bosses that are even more difficult, but drop better rewards. So they frequently drop waystones 1 tier higher. So it'll not only increase the amount of loot that you get, the quality of loot that you get, but it also means that you're going to be getting waystones of a +1 value. So essentially a +1, kind of like the Atlas tree. Existing icons that currently, yes, this is the powerful one that is extra challenging. So we talked about that just now. Following map boss Atlas passive skills now require a powerful boss to be present in the map, and these listed here as well. So now here, like on Beyond Reality, areas with powerful map bosses have a 30% chance to contain corruption when entered. So it does specify that you need to have a powerful map boss versus just a regular map boss. Map areas now generate 1 to 3 extra content, or as Elon would say, things, including Breach, Delirium, Ritual, blah, 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 blah. So they will now generate on their own, without needing the tablet, on average, more things to it, which is honestly just a straight buff. This content will be added in addition to the content added by your modifiers on the Waystone, as well as the tablet modifiers as well. So this is just, again, just a free buff. Like, all the maps on the Atlas are now just getting stronger with more things, like more endgame activities added to them. If you have a modifier that adds an expedition encounter, which cannot have more than 1 in an area, a different type of content is selected instead. So it'll just kind of save that role for you and give you another value on that as well. Content icons for Breach, blah, 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 have been removed from the Atlas. So Breach, Delirium, Ritual, and Expedition have been removed from the Atlas. Which, to be honest, I'm not really sure what they're referencing here. I mean, this now specifies that it's a Kalguran expedition. You have breaches here that are otherworldly breaches, so they actually have some extra elements to that as well. I'm curious how you read this line item on how this means, because it looks like they're just kind of doing the same treatment that they have for the map boss icon became powerful map boss. I guess Breach becomes otherworldly Breach. I'm not even sure if this said this before. I'm kind of blanking. And they also reduced the map sizes for a bunch of maps. So these maps listed here, they reduced the size of them. I think this also kind of was a big disparity for non-rangers with maxed out row amount, and non-characters that aren't running maximum movement speed don't get penalized for maps that are so absurdly large that they end up running for most of it, even with the new sprint mechanic. So having these be smaller is really nice. A couple of these are very big. Vol City is incredibly large. Channel is also incredibly large. A lot of these, Augury can be pretty big too. Savannah can also be massive with a lot of empty space. So I'm glad to see that they're reducing the size of these. The number of monster packs in lower tier maps has been reduced by 30%. As you proceed through the tiers, the number of monster packs will increase so that tier 15 is at the same as it was before. So I guess they're trying to make early end game easier and more accessible for new players. I mean, I think a lot of veteran players end up skipping the low tier maps right away anyways, depending on how good their build is and whether they're SSF or not. But having these be a little bit more accessible and easier for early game, or early end game, I should say. There's definitely a lot of new players that come into the game and jump to end game and then get their stuff pushed in, and then they get completely dominated, and then they get frustrated and they quit. So I think that's kind of going along with that, and maybe they're just trying to make it easier for newer or intermediate players to get through the content. And they also adjusted the composition of all naturally spawning monster packs in maps. The result results in more packs of similar number of monsters, but roughly the same total amount of monsters in a map. So you get more packs, but the same number of monsters. So they're trying to basically kind of look at the more dangerous monsters and make sure that they're a little bit more numerous, because a lot of times there's a lot of trash mobs that aren't going to be dropping too much. Additionally, and this is a big one, the ground effects for ice, lightning, and flames now cover 75% less of the map on tier 1 to tier 5, 68%, 6 to 10, and 62% on tier 11 or higher. Personally, I think this is a massive change. I mean, even on screen, I'm out on a Delulu map with ice all over the ground, and it's also not very, I don't think it does a good job of adjusting the number of patches on the ground based on the kind of map you're facing. Like, you might get Savannah or Wetlands or something, and you're just like out in the open and there's patches and you can avoid them, or you end up getting one of the new tier 4 map or Act 4 maps that are super narrow with a lot of corridors, and even then, when it's a lot of corridors, you can end up getting patches literally everywhere, just covering everything, and it just feels like it's a bit much. You can't avoid the shock, which means you get damage amp. You can't avoid the fire on the ground, which does damage to you, which isn't really a huge deal. And the ice patches you can see here, the ice patch is covering the ramp all the way up, even just because it's a narrow pathway. So having that reduced by 62% at the top end is awesome. They also increased the chance of Citadels spawning by 66%. This is a large number, but you have to understand that these were pretty rare, and also because you could fail the Citadel, which is a big no-no as well. So now, and there's also 2 tiers of the things that you can get from the Citadels. So we just need more Citadels. They weren't spawning enough. You could go for literal like entire continents without seeing a single Citadel, and then you're just traversing and traversing and traversing, and then if you end up failing for whatever reason, you got to go find another one, and you know, that sort of thing. So they just weren't spawning enough. 66% feels probably around the right ballpark. It may even need to be slightly more depending on, you know, what people use for the maps and the fact that they can be failed and things like that, but at least having a 66% increase is a nice win. The Visions of Paradise unique precursor tablet now adds irradiated rather than removing it. Atlas maps connected to a sealed vault can now spawn a Vol beacon on completion, which when clicked will drop an idol of Esta. So now you can't get that situation where you don't get an idol even though you need one in order to enter, and it gets really awkward. So having that is really nice. This item dropped from the final rare monster or map boss. Now it just does when you complete the map, which is really cool. They also added visual effects to the Atlas around maps near vaults, sandstorms, and maelstroms to help guide players. There's definitely those things where it says like find either like the hedgestones or find X, Y, and Z in order to unlock this map. I've seen this question all the time. People are like, how do I get to this map? It doesn't have a line to it. I can't get to it. And it's not super clear that you have to go find the glowing maps and complete them, or look at the nearby maps until you find the right drops. So having the visual effects should help out a lot, which I tried to look around on my Atlas to find it, and I think I did. It looks like there's like, you see this smoke coming off. I could traverse over here to find it, but it looks like there's like a pointing smoke now towards this. We used to have like this little gold glowing effect or like the blue glowing effect to know that there was something there, but it does seem like there's like this new effect. I don't think I've seen this before, this smoke pointing at a new direction. Even over here to find like this sandstorm, you can see, I don't know if this green was here before. I swear to God, I'm going crazy, but there's like this smoke effect over here on the Viridian, and then there's this green effect as well near the sandstorm. And even here you can see there's another one, like these two are pointing, like they actually have smoke pointing at it. So you can see this is a sandstorm. You have to be able to open it up, but the nodes that are nearby now have this smoke that's pointing to it, which is a really nice change. Updated the Precursor Towers quest to end once you've spoken to Doriani after doing the tower. They updated various dialogue lines to line up with what's going on, and the walking sequences from the Sacred Reservoir map has been removed. Big win. I think they should do more of this. The RP is really cool during the campaign, but some of the forced RP, like the forced walking and things like that, or even just the walking sequence on Sacred Reservoir, I think those things need to be cleaned up, either sped up or just removed for the endgame version, because they can cause problems. There were also some changes to the League mechanics. So for Rise of the Abyss, the Well of Souls now shows a more detailed description for the type of passive skill nodes the revealed modifier options will affect. I think they should just go crazy and do this kind of change to the whole freaking game, I swear to God. Like, add more reference, more detail, show what prefixes and suffixes can show on items, give us detail on what we can find on gems, allow us to actually show a full character sheet like we have in things like Path of Building, like more info, more tooltips, more details, more access, more like quality of life, things like that. I would love it too if you could like open a map and then open your stash from your map without having to leave the Atlas and things like that. More of this will go a long way. 12 Souls now applies the resistance penalty of your highest reach act rather than strictly Act 2. Icons from Abyss cracks no longer display on the edge of the mini-map when out of range. That's kind of nice. It did look kind of funky. Enabled the Eruption of Souls Abyssal Rare Monster modifier. Hopefully this is fixed. We'll have to see when we run into it. And they added the Abyss to the Atlas map legend, which is nice. They also did some player changes when calculating chance to hit versus players or their minions. We now use the following formula. Chance to hit 1 minus 95% of the defender evasion divided by the defender evasion plus 4 times the attacker accuracy. So this is the chance to hit on the player, not on the enemies. Your chance to hit is unchanged. Players no longer receive evasion rating scaling with level. Instead, the base evasion rating is now 7, down from 27. This will result in all classes having a 5% chance to evade baseline at level 1 with no equipment, which I believe is like for all classes is like to the point where you get 0, right? Like you get some amount of evasion rating at base without having anything added from items or other effects. And this effect, it results in basically a 0% evasion rating. It's like a couple hundred or something like that, ends up being 0. But now it's going to be, you'll get a 5% chance to evade. So I think this should help campaign clears for some people over time, like law of large numbers. We talk about through the entire campaign, a 5% evasion rating will make a sizable difference, and probably is just targeted at making the early game easier for players. Monster accuracy rating scaling has been adjusted slightly to account for the above changes. The base pickup radius for all remnants has been increased by 50%. This one has been a big thing. I've been playing infusions. I started playing fire infusion on sorceress. It sucked major balls. I had to re-roll basically and kind of make an endgame build out of thin air. So I ended up going with a frostbolt build using like, you know, forks and things like that. So that's where I ended up with where it is. But there's definitely been a big challenge with infusions, having to go into a dangerous area to pick up the infusions after the fact. So increasing the radius, I'm guessing if the baseline radius has gone up and then you have the modifiers that allow you to grab them from an increased radius, I'm guessing that scales off the new base, which means potentially you could actually have a very large pickup radius for infusions if you have the radius pickup through various effects in the game. The Stormreaver's Remnant Range Ascendancy passive now has remnants can be collected from 20% further away. Never mind, they thought of this already. I was going to say if the baseline goes up, the scaling values of the other effects would make it even bigger, but it looks like they thought of that and just preemptively nerfed these things. I mean, this going up 50% and this coming down by 33% means you can still probably get a higher value overall, but they definitely, I guess, didn't want it to be screen wide on the grab there. The Principal Infusion Notable passive now has remnants can be collected from 20% further away from 15%. And it looks like they went through all of these as well. So small passive nodes went from 10%. Provide remnant pickup range. The small passive nodes got buffed from 10% to 15%. The big nodes got nerfed. Harmonic remnant support went from 100% further away to 35% further away. They're not joking on this one. Siphon elements went from 47% to 38% on the pickup. You are now also unable to have more than 10 Ancestral Warrior totems currently active at once. I'm not sure if there was a build. I haven't seen too many Ancestral Warrior totem builds in action, but if you've been playing one this season, let me know how you feel about this change. I don't know if you people were getting over 10 in general. This is probably causing performance issues if there were too many on screen. They also made improvements to parry behavior to reduce the number of times it looks like it hit, but it didn't. They reduced the heavy stun buildup a player gains when parrying, the amount of heavy stun buildup applied by monsters at very low levels. That's a nice change as well. Personally, I hope they adjust the light stunning, especially for campaign progress for certain builds, so I think it would go a long way. The Void Illusion skill now works with Hollow Palm's physical damage modifier. The plants from Vine Arrow can now only take poison damage from allies. Persistent buff, there was probably a party thing where people were abusing this and getting crazy numbers from it. The persistent buff skills that must be active in all weapon sets now describe the requirement. That's awesome. And Whirling Assault now uses pathfinding to avoid obstacles. For general changes, you can now use Orbs of Alchemy on magic items. So this at first, like if you don't read the second sentence here, you probably think this is kind of smudge. Like this is actually kind of weird, right? Like obviously we have regals. You can just use like trans and regal and get to your rarity on that as well. However, the second sentence is super important here. So if you're wondering why this even matters, the second sentence solves that. So basically the way this works now is if you want to go from normal rarity to blue, you would use your Aug and Trans to get your affixes, and then you would regal it to your yellow. However, this is a very clever change to make sure alchemy still is relevant in the current meta. When used on magic items, it will re-roll the affixes on the item and give it 4 new ones when it goes into rare. This is big, which means that you can go from normal to rare with Trans and Aug. If you don't get any affixes that are good for you, you can then slam it with an Alch. The Alch will re-roll both of those magic level modifiers on it and give you 4 new ones. So if you get 2 trash mods, you can then Alch it to just drop it out, right? So like it gives you that option to be able to use the normal method with Regals, or you can alch it if you got nothing good, which I think is a really cool change. Enabled the Romira's Requital and Callistus Crescendo lineage support gems, which were mistakenly not able to drop. So now those are in the drop pool and you can get them now. They added 779 more foiled unique items from the reliquary that can yield there as well. Elzara, the Cobra Lord in the Sanctuary, now drops a one-time guaranteed Baria that can be used to obtain your third ascendancy points if you have not already acquired them. So this is pretty big. When you do the Selkari Sanctuary, you can now get a option for the Sekhmis item that allows you to get your third ascendancy without having to roll the RNG or buy it if you happen to be in Tradely. This will drop for new and existing characters regardless of whether they have already killed Elzara. Updated the Treasures of Utsal quest steps to be more clear for characters that were defeating the Forge Master after already completing the treasure quest line on another character. They added Jacob, the town crier, to Kingsmarch, who will update the town on your journey as you progress. That's kind of neat. I kind of want to go check that out. The character panel estimations for player accuracy, armor, and evasion now use a maximum monster level of 82 for calculations, previously from level 84. I mean, realistically, it's like monster level 79 for 15s, right? So you're kind of in the ballpark of you're pushing endgame and juicing maps anyways, so I guess that kind of makes sense. Stash and Merchant UI will now remember your previously entered search terms. That's a nice change. Omen of Whittling will now correctly highlight desecrated modifiers if they can be re-rolled. This was confusing people unless you just tried to click on it just to make sure that it worked. Undying Hate now has a keyword description for unstable desecration, clarifying that preserved cranium currency items have an increased chance to destroy the item. Updated description of Zenith 2 support to clarify that only mana costs are recouped. Updated description of Freeze, Electrocute, and Pin buildup on monsters. Added the density and spacing of packs in the Kari Crossing and Kima, or adjusted it. Added the salvage and reforge benches to the Kari Bazaar. Added a second sprint animation for higher movement speed, just to make it look nicer. Better animations for reloads, which is really nice. Changed some suggested reports that weren't really making sense, specifically for Flash Grenade and Lightning Warp. Reduce the damage and projectile count of the Treant Foulspawn Barrage skill. Thank God, this was terrifying. The Blood Thief Queen monster can no longer be tamed or bound as a Spectre. If you're playing a Spectre build this season, let me know what you think about this one. I don't know if any people have been using Blood Thief Queen, but it is kind of an interesting topic. And we've got some cosmetics coming online. The Dark Shroud armor set and other pieces is now available. Enabled the use of the Ancient Dread armor set and the Dark Shard cloak and wings, which a quick look in game tells me they're not currently in the Path of Exile 2 store, but if you buy them in the Path of Exile 1 store and then you have them, they should be usable now in Path of Exile 2. They also added in the Solar Knight armor set in Path of Exile 2. They made adjustments to the audio system. This should help performance. There's been a lot of issues where the audio banks have been getting overloaded in the new .3 patch, so things get kind of janky or like sounds start playing over and over and over. So this should not only help with performance, but also make audio not sound weird. They also improved the performance on the Trample Toe boots, Abyss Cracks, Scorched Farmlands, King's March, and the Forge Hammer Aftershocks are no longer silent. Then a bunch of bug fixes, so I'll just have these on screen. You can pause the video and read them if you care about the bug fixes in general. There are some pretty decent ones in here which would apply some quality of life, some things that get stuck, some bosses that get trapped in some soft locks, things like that, some other bug fixes across the board. Then we can scroll all the way down to the bottom, which is probably one of the most important ones for everybody here, and that's going to be 2 instance crashes, 2 client crashes, a client crash on PlayStation, and some situations where DirectX was having issues. People were switching to Vulkan on .3 because they were having issues with DirectX. So hopefully with some fixes here, people should be able to return to DirectX if that's what they want to use. Another client freeze when entering a new area and some other things along that as well. So some pretty good fixes overall on the bug fix front. So that is the new patch. Some pretty massive changes, reworks to how tablets and towers work on the Atlas, some reworks to some functional elements to the end game aspect, some changes to some baseline elements for campaign leveling, and some other things on how monsters are calculated. Let me know what you think about this patch. I know it's a bit of a controversial idea. Some people don't like major changes like this in the middle of the season, but I think the community at large was in agreement that they didn't like the way towers were the end-all be-all for the traversal of the Atlas. So let me know how you feel about these changes now live in Path of Exile 2 down below in the comments. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below. below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.